Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to be wanted, the more invisible you begin to feel? There comes a quiet moment in many women's lives when they realize that effort, kindness, and emotional availability did not lead to love, but to exhaustion. This is not a loud realization. It arrives softly, often late at night when the body is tired and the heart feels strangely empty despite having given so much. What if the very act of trying to be wanted is the thing that slowly erases you? From an early age, many women are taught that being chosen is the measure of worth. You learn to listen more than you speak, to soften your edges, to understand before being understood. You become agreeable, reliable, emotionally intelligent, and endlessly patient. On the surface, this looks like maturity. Inside, it often feels like quiet self-abandonment. Over time, you stop asking what you feel and start asking what will keep the connection alive. You do not disappear all at once. You fade in small, reasonable ways that feel noble in the moment and costly later. This is where Carl Jung's perspective turns the entire story upside down. Jung did not see the self as something we improve through performance. He saw it as something we uncover through honesty. When a woman organizes her life around being wanted, she begins living from a mask rather than her center. The mask may be praised, but it is not loved. And anything that is loved only for how well it performs can be replaced by someone who performs just as well or better. This is the hidden tragedy of trying to be wanted. It does not make you precious. It makes you interchangeable. Many women sense this long before they can explain it. They notice that the more they adapt, the less desired they feel. The more understanding they become, the less they are seen. The more they give, the less they are pursued. This creates confusion and self-doubt. You start wondering what you are doing wrong, when the real issue is that you are doing too much of what disconnects you from yourself. Jung would say that when we abandon the inner truth to secure external approval, the psyche fractures, energy leaks, attraction fades, and the soul grows tired. Irreplaceable women are not formed by polishing the mask. They are revealed when the mask no longer runs the show. There is a profound shift that happens when a woman stops asking how to be chosen and starts asking who she actually is. This shift does not make her colder or less loving. It makes her real. And reality has a gravity that performance never will. When a woman begins to live from her wholeness rather than her fear of being unchosen, something changes in the room. People feel it before they understand it. This journey is not about becoming better for others. It is about becoming whole for yourself. It asks a difficult but liberating question. What if your exhaustion is not a flaw, but a signal that your soul is tired of performing? And what if the woman you are trying so hard to become is standing in the way of the woman you already are? It often begins with praise, not pain. You are told you are easy to be with, dependable, emotionally mature, and someone who never creates problems. Let us look closely at what this actually looks like in real life. A woman stays late at work to help everyone else finish, even when her body is tired. She listens patiently while her partner unloads stress night after night, yet she hesitates to share her own worries because she does not want to be a burden. In her family, she becomes the calm one, the peacemaker, the one who understands everyone. On the outside, she is admired. On the inside, she feels strangely unseen. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we develop to belong, to survive, and to be accepted. At first, the persona is useful. It helps you navigate relationships, workplaces, and family roles. But when a woman lives inside this mask for too long, something subtle and dangerous happens. She begins to confuse being accepted with being loved. She starts shaping her voice, her reactions, and even her boundaries around what keeps other people comfortable. She laughs when something hurts. She says yes when her body wants to say no. She reassures others while quietly abandoning herself. You can see this clearly in dating. A woman meets someone she likes, and without realizing it, she begins editing herself. She waits before texting so she does not seem needy. She hides her disappointment when plans change. She agrees with opinions she does not fully share. None of these choices feels dramatic. They feel reasonable, mature, kind, but underneath them is a silent calculation. If I am easier, I will be chosen. If I ask for less, I will be kept. This is not manipulation. It is survival dressed up as love. The same pattern shows up in long-term relationships. Many women become the emotional backbone of the household. They remember birthdays, manage moods, smooth conflicts, and carry the invisible labor of keeping everything running. Over time, their own desires become vague even to themselves. When asked what they want, they pause too long. Jung would say this is the cost of over-identifying with the persona. When you are loved for how well you perform a role, the relationship is no longer connected to who you are, but to what you provide. This is where the trap closes. If you are valued for being endlessly understanding, you can be replaced by anyone willing to be just as understanding. If you are loved for being low maintenance, you can be replaced by someone who asks for even less. The mask that once kept you safe quietly makes you interchangeable. And the psyche knows this, even if the mind does not. That is why resentment grows. That is why attraction fades. That is why a woman can be surrounded by people and still feel deeply alone. The most painful part is that society often rewards this self-erasure. You are praised for being strong, flexible, and selfless, yet no one asks what it costs you. Jung warned that whatever we build our identity around eventually demands payment. When love is earned through performance, the payment is authenticity. The soul grows tired of acting. The body grows tense. The eyes lose their sparkle not because of age, but because they are always watching, adjusting, and managing. The turning point comes when a woman begins to notice how often she edits herself, how often she swallows a truth to keep the peace. How often does she choose being liked over being real? This awareness is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating, because once you see the mask, you can no longer pretend it is your face. And once you realize you have been trained to earn love instead of live truth, a new question emerges. What would happen if you stopped performing and allowed yourself to be seen, not as good, but as whole? There is a reason attraction fades, even when nothing is technically wrong, and most women sense it long before they understand it. Picture this. You are in a relationship where everything looks fine from the outside. He is kind. He shows up. He does not mistreat you. Yet something inside you feels restless. You find yourself irritated over small things, emotionally distant during intimacy, or strangely drawn to someone else who gives you far less. You ask yourself, why am I like this? And quietly feel ashamed for wanting more when you already have enough. This is where Carl Jung's idea of the shadow enters real life. The shadow is not a dark or dangerous part of you. It is simply everything you learned to hide in order to stay loved. Think of the moments that taught you to swallow yourself. The time you were told you were too emotional, so you learned to stay calm. The time your anger caused conflict, so you decided it was safer to be agreeable. The time your desire, ambition, or independence made someone uncomfortable, so you softened yourself to keep the peace. None of this was a conscious choice. It was survival. At first, repressing these parts seems to work. You become easy to be with. People praise you for being mature, understanding, and low maintenance. Relationships form. Stability follows. But under the surface, the energy of those buried parts does not disappear. It waits. Over time, this creates patterns that feel confusing and painful. A woman loses interest in partners who are emotionally available, but becomes deeply attached to those who are distant or inconsistent. Another woman feels numb during intimacy, going through the motions while her body feels disconnected. Some women become anxious without knowing why, constantly checking messages, reading tone, or fearing abandonment, even when nothing is wrong. Others feel exhausted after social interactions, as if they are always performing a version of themselves instead of resting in who they truly are. These are not personal flaws. They are signs of an unexpressed inner life. Jung believed that whatever we repress does not stay hidden. It returns through our behavior, our relationships, and our emotional reactions. In modern terms, this means the parts of you that were silenced begin to leak out sideways. Anger turns into resentment. Desire turns into restlessness. Grief turns into fatigue. Authentic attraction collapses not because you are broken, but because too much of your vitality is locked away. You can see this clearly in dating. A woman meets someone safe and steady but feels bored and disconnected. Then she meets someone unavailable and suddenly feels alive, alert, emotionally charged. This is not because chaos is attractive. It is because the unavailable person activates the parts of her that have been suppressed. The longing gives her intensity because her real self has been waiting to be felt. The same pattern appears in long-term relationships. When a woman never expresses dissatisfaction, never allows conflict, and never lets her full emotional range surface, intimacy slowly fades. Her partner senses distance but cannot name it. She feels unseen, yet she has hidden herself so well that there is little left to see. The shift begins when a woman stops fearing her depth, when she allows anger to exist without turning it into cruelty, when she names her needs without apologizing, when she lets grief move instead of freezing it inside her body. The shadow, once acknowledged, becomes a source of life force rather than sabotage. This is the paradox most women were never taught. The parts of you that you feared would make you unlovable are often the very parts that make you magnetic. When you stop smiling through discomfort, attraction becomes grounded. When you stop shrinking your truth, intimacy deepens. The shadow is not working against you, it is guiding you back to wholeness. And when you stop running from it, your energy settles, your presence sharpens, and attraction begins to flow without effort. There is a moment in many women's lives when the old way of surviving simply stops working, and no amount of positivity or patience can hold it together anymore. This is not the moment people post about. This is the moment that happens quietly, often in private, when something inside finally collapses under its own weight. It may look like a divorce that comes after years of trying to be understanding, forgiving, and reasonable. On the outside, you did everything right. You communicated. You compromised. You stayed longer than you should have because you believed love meant endurance. Then one day, you wake up and realize you cannot keep negotiating your own spirit away. The relationship did not fail because you were not enough. It broke because the version of you that kept it alive was no longer sustainable. For another woman, the breaking point comes through betrayal. Not always dramatic, not always obvious. Sometimes it is discovering emotional infidelity. Sometimes it is realizing that promises were never meant to be kept. Sometimes it is the slow, painful awareness that you were loyal to someone who was only loyal to their comfort. The betrayal hurts, but what hurts more is the clarity that follows. You see all the moments you ignored your intuition, all the times your body knew before your mind did. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. For many women over 35, the breakdown arrives as exhaustion rather than drama. You wake up one morning and feel empty despite having a full life. The career is stable. The family depends on you. People describe you as strong. Yet inside, you feel strangely disconnected from yourself. You keep going through the motions, but the joy is gone. Your body feels heavy. Your patience is thin. You feel guilty for wanting more, yet you cannot name what more even means. This is often when anxiety or burnout appears, not as an illness, but as a signal. Something essential has been neglected for too long. Carl Jung described individuation as the process of becoming who you truly are, and he was clear about one thing. It rarely begins gently. The psyche resists transformation until it has no other option. The breakdown is not a punishment, it is a summons. It is the moment the false self can no longer carry the complexity of your inner life. This is the furnace where the nice version of you begins to burn away, the one who kept the peace at all costs, the one who said yes when she meant no, the one who swallowed her anger to avoid conflict, the one who measured her worth by how useful, loving, or accommodating she could be. In the heat of crisis, that version cannot survive. And while this feels terrifying, it is also profoundly relieving. You may notice that during this period, familiar things stop working. Advice that once helped feels hollow. Distractions lose their power. Even people who used to soothe you no longer can. This is not because you are becoming difficult or broken. It is because you are becoming honest. Your psyche is asking for alignment, not approval. The turning point often arrives quietly. It is not a dramatic declaration. It is an internal vow made in a moment of clarity. I will not abandon myself again. This vow changes everything. It does not mean life immediately gets easier. It means you stop participating in your own erasure. You begin listening to discomfort instead of overriding it. You allow grief to surface instead of numbing it. You stop chasing validation from places that require you to shrink. What once felt like the end begins to reveal itself as the beginning. Not the beginning of a better performance, but the beginning of a truer life. The breaking was necessary. It was the psyche clearing space. And in that space, something stronger than the old self begins to breathe. Something subtle but irreversible changes the moment she stops reaching outward for confirmation and turns back toward herself. This is not a dramatic decision announced to the world. It is a quiet internal recalibration, and its effects ripple into every interaction that follows. You see it clearly in real life. A woman who once typed long messages trying to explain her feelings now pauses, not because she has nothing to say, but because she finally trusts that her truth does not need persuasion. Where she once over-explained a boundary, she now states it simply, or chooses silence when silence feels more honest. Where she once tried to smooth discomfort, she now allows it to exist without rushing to fix it. The chasing ends not with anger, but with clarity. Take the example of dating. She used to replay conversations in her head, wondering if she said too much or not enough. She checked her phone constantly, reading meaning into response times and tone. Now, she notices something different. If someone is interested, their effort is visible without her managing it. If they pull away, she no longer rushes to close the gap. She lets the space speak. What once felt unbearable now feels instructive. The anxiety fades because she is no longer asking someone else to regulate her sense of worth. In friendships, the shift is just as powerful. She stops being the one who always initiates, always listens, always makes room, not out of resentment, but awareness. She notices who shows up when she stops performing emotional labor. Some connections naturally deepen, others quietly dissolve. This is not a loss, it is alignment revealing itself. At work, she stops volunteering for everything in the hope of being indispensable. She says no when the cost is too high. She speaks with fewer words but greater presence. Colleagues begin to respond differently, not because she became dominant, but because she became centered. People sense when someone is no longer negotiating their value. Carl Jung described the movement from persona to self as a return to the center of the psyche. This is exactly what happens here. Her energy stops leaking outward. She is no longer split between who she is and who she thinks she needs to be. In that integration, something magnetic emerges. This is why silence becomes powerful. It is not a withdrawal meant to provoke. It is peace that does not ask to be understood. Presence replaces performance. She listens more. She reacts less. And paradoxically, she becomes more noticeable. People may not be able to explain why she feels different now. They just feel it. The woman who stops chasing becomes unforgettable because she is no longer trying to be remembered. She is anchored in herself. And when someone stands fully in their own center, the world responds without being summoned. There comes a moment when a woman realizes that her exhaustion is not coming from life itself, but from how often she has ignored her own limits. This realization does not make her harder. It makes her honest. And honesty, when embodied, carries a quiet power. You see this shift clearly in everyday situations. In family dynamics, she is no longer the one who rearranges her entire schedule to keep everyone comfortable. When a relative expects emotional availability at all hours, she pauses and says, "Not today." There is no explanation wrapped in guilt, no long justification to soften the refusal. At first, the room feels unsettled. People who benefited from her endless giving feel confused, but something else happens too. Her presence gains weight. When she does show up, it matters more because it is chosen, not extracted. In dating, the change is unmistakable. She no longer says yes when her body feels tight and her intuition feels off. She no longer replies immediately out of fear of seeming uninterested. If a plan does not feel aligned, she declines calmly. This does not push the right people away. It filters them. Those who are only interested in access lose interest. Those who are capable of respect lean in. Her no becomes an invitation for truth to reveal itself. At work, magnetism appears when she stops overfunctioning. She no longer stays late to prove her value or takes on tasks that quietly drain her. She speaks up when expectations cross her limits. Colleagues begin to respond differently, not with hostility, but with recognition. They sense that her energy is no longer available for misuse, and paradoxically, this earns her more respect than compliance ever did. Jung understood that magnetism emerges from inner alignment. When a woman stops betraying herself, her psyche becomes coherent. Thoughts, feelings, and actions move in the same direction. This coherence is felt by others before it is understood. People may not articulate why she feels different, but they sense the boundary. They feel the integrity. Friendships also reorganize. Some connections fade when emotional labor is no longer freely provided. Others deepen when mutuality replaces obligation. The loneliness that may arise is not chaotic. It is clean, and from that clarity, a real connection grows. Her no is not rejection. It is discernment. It is the line that says, "This is where I end and you begin." And what passes through that line is no longer confusion, resentment, or exhaustion. What remains is genuine interest, mutual respect, and relationships that can stand on truth rather than sacrifice. At the end of this journey, something subtle but profound becomes clear. The woman who is wanted by everyone is not the woman who learned how to attract. She is the woman who finally stopped asking for permission to exist as she is. When she chose herself, something inside her settled. The restless scanning of rooms ended. The quiet question of "Am I enough?" dissolved. In its place came a grounded presence that does not reach outward for approval. She does not become flawless. She becomes integrated. Her softness no longer hides fear. Her firmness no longer masks anger. She can feel deeply without drowning in emotion, and she can stand alone without feeling abandoned. When she speaks, her words are not polished for acceptance. They are shaped by truth. When she listens, she is present rather than calculating what to give next. This coherence is not loud, but it is unmistakable. Her life begins to reorganize in small, honest ways. Invitations change, conversations deepen or end. Some people drift away when they realize she will no longer play the role they relied on. That loss can sting. It asks her to grieve what was familiar, even when it was draining. But that grief clears space, and into that space come connections that do not require performance. Friendships where silence is safe, relationships where effort flows both ways, respect that is given without negotiation. Jung described this as living from the self rather than the mask. When a woman no longer splits herself into who she is and who she should be, her energy becomes whole. Others respond to this wholeness instinctively. They may call it confidence or magnetism, but what they are sensing is integrity. There is nothing to manage or manipulate. There is simply presence. The lesson here is not about becoming desirable, it is about becoming real. Trying to be wanted fractures the soul. Choosing yourself restores it. When you stop abandoning your inner truth, your nervous system calms, your boundaries strengthen, and your relationships realign. You no longer chase because there is nothing missing that needs to be filled by another person. This is the quiet paradox. The moment you stop trying to be irreplaceable, you become it. Not because you impressed the world, but because you came home to yourself. And from that place, what belongs to you finds you naturally, without effort, without force, and without fear. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.